This is Ken Lizotte. I am author of two books, The Speaker's Edge and The Expert's Edge. And in my episode for the Business Growth Architect Show, I will be sharing how you can go from being a best kept secret to a recognized thought leader. In particular, we'll go through a process called the Pillars of Thought Leading, and we will focus especially on speaking and how you can do more of that and why that's very important to your business development.
Welcome to the Business Growth Architect Show. I am Beate Gillette. I am the host. I want to welcome you to our globally top 10% ranked podcast, where you will hear from industry experts about the strategies that are working right now to unlock hidden opportunities in any market so that you can grow your authority and scale your impact. And now let's get started with the show. Welcome back. This is Beate Gillette, the host of the Business Growth Architect Show. Today, we're talking to Ken Lizotte, and Ken is an author of multiple books, including The Speaker's Edge, which is what we're going to be talking about today. Ken, I am so excited to have you on the show. Thank you for being here.
Beate, I am ecstatic to be on your show.
I like to hear that. So for somebody who has not heard about you or does not know what you do, will you tell them a little bit sort of what you help business owners or people with, and what is it that you do?
Sure. What I do basically is I make my clients, who are all business entrepreneurs and experts of different kinds, famous. And the way I do that is not necessarily that I make them mega famous, but I make them famous among their target markets. And how I do that has to do with taking them from a best kept secret, which a lot of them are. They're a best kept secret because their clients know what kind of experts they are, and are probably happy and paying them money ongoing and all of that. But to take it from that and getting their reputation out to the wider world, the wider business world, and be seen as what I call recognized thought leaders. And that's what we might talk about today.
I love the differentiation that you make, is that authority and thought leadership and famous does not mean to be a celebrity. Can you speak to that a little bit, of where people get that screwed up in their head? Because I know people think influencing and celebrity is authority or expert status. Is that true or is that false?
Well, for a business person or a company, whether it's an individual business expert or a company, what they really want to do is think about how they can become just famous in the right places. To be a megastar, like, for example, I help people get a book developed and published. And not most of the time, but some of the time, somebody will say, "Oh, you know what I'd really love is to have a bestseller." Now, that sounds really good, but being a bestseller, if it really happens to you, you better be happy with the idea of your life changing and your business changing, because that's going to cause a few things to happen. One is you're going to be doing a lot of speaking engagements, which we'll talk about speaking in this program. But do you want to be doing them, 50 or 100 times each year? And the second thing is, what a publisher does, if your book is a bestseller, is they want you to go right back and write another one. So it's a whole different lifestyle. It's a whole different thing. And some people want it, but that's really not the target for most people. Most people would like to separate themselves from their competition. And one way to do that is to practice what I call the pillars of thought leading.
I like the differentiation factor, and I wanted to make sure that we have this very clear for our Beehive outlined, that you as a business owner or as an expert do get to make the decision on whether or not you want to have a life, which does not happen when you are on the road 200 days a year. Because remember, when you speak 100 days, then you have to get there and you have to come back. So for every day you speak, you have another day or a day and a half for travel. Plus, you have the preparation for the talk and everything that goes into it. So suddenly that takes over everything. When we talk about authority building, and I loved that you said that, Ken, you want to be very deliberate about which piece you want to do. And people don't think about this when they go into it. They just say, oh, I'll take anything. I'll do whatever it takes. Well, when you get there, and I have worked with speakers, as I know you have, that have been on the road literally 250 days out of the
Yes.
year, and
Yeah.
they're just wiped out. They're just
Yeah.
completely wiped out.
Yeah.
So now you talk about speaking and thought leadership. Can you take our audience through why speaking is so critical to be an expert or to get to authority status? Why that is a very viable strategy?
Well, the process we use is we call it a thought leading strategy, and it involves these what I call five pillars of thought leading, and that they're outlined in one of my books, which is called The Expert's Edge. The speaking is in there, and it's really important. But let me just say that number one, I think, is actually publishing your ideas, either in a book or in a series of articles or whatever. But publishing your ideas for that underscore of credibility, and then the number two is speaking. And what happens is that by having this credibility from your ideas being published, people can either read it, or even if they just see that you've got a book and they don't even read it, they're giving you a certain level of credibility. The speaking then brings it up a notch, because now you're actually interacting with real people, and it brings to life your ideas, and it also starts to create relationships. I think that speakers I think a lot of speakers are missing something by not having published their ideas, which is true for not most, but many speakers. But even in that case, you can't get away from the fact that if they do a great job in front of an audience, they're starting to create relationships, and those relationships, I don't know about you, but for me, when I've gone out and done speaking, sometimes not much happens. Maybe it goes really well, but not much happens. But other times, one, two, three, four people come out of the audience and say to me, "Can I talk to you at some point later? Because it looks like what you do is something that I really would like somebody to help me do." So there you go. One, two, three, four, five clients or whatever. That's a relationship. And that's why speaking is so powerful.
Yes, I agree with you on the importance of the visibility. It is critical to be in front of the right audience. Speaking is probably one of the fastest way to be in front of a pre-vetted audience, because if you're speaking at a particular conference, it has a theme, and you speaking about a topic, and the room is full with people who want to hear the topic, you
Right.
know already that they're having some sort of interest in what you have to say. That makes your time to a potential client, it really, really shortens that.
Yeah.
The other piece that I want to talk to you about is you talk about thought leadership and speaking. So now we've established that getting in front of people is a great way to get business or a great way to get visibility. What different types of speaking opportunities are out there?
What I said earlier, when you asked me to identify myself and explain what I do, I said I make my clients famous. And one of the things I have in my book, The Speaker's Edge, is a different type of elevator speech, where I call it an impact message. And that's part of my impact message. I will get up and say, "My name is Ken Lizotte. I'm with Emerson Consulting Group, and I make my clients famous. The way I do this is I help them become recognized thought leaders. So if any of you in the audience are wanting to move up and become thought leaders, let me know." Now that was less than 30 seconds, but I have to tell you that that's as good as a keynote, because I have done it, and I have had three, four, five people come up, and some of them become clients. And the thing is that the mistake a lot of people make with speaking is thinking that they really have to be the keynoter in order to make an impact. I'll tell you real quick. I'll tell you another story of mine. It's with speaking. When I started 26 years ago, it was because I was asked to be a part of a panel, and the panel was, believe it or not, writing and publishing and speaking to advance your consulting practice. I had about 40 people in the audience. It wasn't just me; it was a panel. So I was one of three, and but I did get people coming up to me that day or that night, and wanting to work with me and have me work with them. It's just that kind of dynamic that takes place, and it ensures that it's gonna be more than just like a one-off. That it's gonna be something that moves your business along and moves it up to another level.
Yes. So speaking is not just speaking on stage, not just being the keynote. Speaking is a breakout session, a panel session. Speaking is at the
Yes.
local association, at the networking breakfast.
Mhm.
What about podcasts? Is that another way to pursue this?
I consider what we're doing now virtual speaking. Only 3 or 4 years ago, none of us knew much about this kind of thing. We might have been on a podcast or having a podcast, but it's particularly with Zoom and the capabilities of those kinds of services now, and we're all getting used to being in meetings with our clients or whatever. It's definitely a venue for speaking that is here to stay. What you were saying before about all the things you have to do in order to go out live in the traditional speaking, get on a plane and check in a hotel, and all of it might be 2 3 days for 1 hour speaking. Now we don't have to do that as much. So I have a lot of my clients who are regular speakers, and they love the fact that this is an option. They don't always necessarily want to do it all the time, every time, but they love that it's an option. Because you and I, Beata, we hopped on about 10, 15 minutes ago, and we'll hop off maybe 15, 20 minutes from now or whatever, and we won't have to rush to the airport.
Yeah, I will tell you that I do not miss the travel. There was a time where I did a fair amount of speaking, and I love being out in front of an audience, and I love the connection and the interaction. And there really is nothing like connecting with people, learning about
Yeah.
what trends are in the industry. You can't really beat that. But I will say that when we look at this from an authority perspective, is that there is a fine line between balancing on how much you're willing to give off yourself to others and how much of it, if you say, well, would you rather spend an entire day to travel from Los Angeles to New York to speak and travel an entire day back from New York to speak for a 1 hour speaking engagement? Or would you rather, out of those 3 full days, have a 1 hour virtual slot or a half-hour virtual slot, right? So those are things that I think we have to evaluate within the overall business model. So can the part where you've taken us through now this idea of thought leadership. I know you have a framework around thought leadership. Do you want to touch on that, on what it actually entails? We say at the Growth Architect that we work with visionaries and thought leaders and help them to grow their authority and scale their impact. But people are not sure what exactly is a thought leader. So what is a thought leader, Ken?
Well, it has to be somebody who's willing to do some thinking. That's part of it. But I think I mentioned the what I call the 5 pillars of thought leading, and I'll tell you really quickly what each of them is. I've mentioned 2 of them so far because they're the most important ones in many ways. And the first one is to publish your ideas. As I said before, I believe that that's a matter of credibility. A lot of times when I see a speaker, for example, and they say, "Oh, anybody want my PowerPoint slides? I'm happy to send them to you," and they have no article reprint, they have no book, none of that. And the problem with that is that it's only they're an expert and they're a thought leader at that moment, but it only goes so far. So publishing your ideas is number one to me. This is the way I see it. Speaking is number two, and the third I call fresh thinking, which is it could be surveys, it could be a report, or it could be just original thinking about how issues are or can be resolved for your clients. The fourth is called creatively leveraging the internet. And I don't necessarily mean social media, although a lot of people think of that immediately. I think that, like, email marketing, for example, is way more effective than social media, and whatever else might fall under this category. But you, for example, are really good at reminders and getting the word out and advertising yourself and promoting yourself and your program. That I'm going to see your messages more than if you're just doing it on Twitter. And I mean, even 2 years ago when Twitter hadn't fallen apart yet. But it's creatively leveraging the internet is using it right. And the last one is vigorous use of the media, which is the traditional PR, publicity, and that kind of thing. I place it last because you don't have much control over what somebody says about you or writes about you if you get interviewed, or even if they do at all. It's a good adjunct to the other four pillars of thought leading. And you put them all together and you're definitely a thought leader. However, I don't want people to be overwhelmed with what I'm saying and think that I'm suggesting you've got to do all of those things. But I think if you're going to only pick a couple of them, publishing and speaking are the most important.
Yes, I agree. I think the visibility is next to none, and it forces you also to hear yourself talk. It forces you to see what you write. It forces you to get your message cohesive because you can't keep rambling on in a certain amount of time. So we'll talk about fine-tuning the message in just one moment, right after this message. Are you looking for the hidden opportunities for you in this market? Or are you simply wanting to figure out what is your unique differentiation factor that makes clients want to work with you and not your competitors? If this resonates, I want to invite you to go to uncoverysession.com and schedule your 15-minute complimentary uncovery session with one of our business growth advisors that will take you through what your number one business growth blocker is, what you can do to remove it, and what your very best next step should be. And now let's get back to the show. Welcome back. This is Beate Schlett, your host, and I am talking to Ken Lizotte about thought leadership, about speaking. So one of the things that I have found is, Ken, that a lot of people have a very difficult time to get clear what they are a thought leader on, or how to identify what they should be speaking about, because they could talk about sales, they could talk about mergers and acquisitions, they could talk about strategy, they could talk about networking, they could talk about, and then it just sounds like a convoluted mess. Do you have any tips for somebody who says, well, what do you want me to speak about? Because if you say that to a podcast host or to a conference organizer, I can guarantee you're not getting the slot, because it is not my job as a podcast host to tell you what you should be speaking about. You should come to me and say, here are the 3 things that I think would fit for your show. Which resonates the most? That's what we did when we were doing our pre-call interview. We went through a couple different things until we landed on this particular topic. Help people to figure out how to organize this in their head, how to get these pitches or hooks flushed out.
Okay, so this is what I see this as, is as a business development tool. What is the and what is the business that you're in, and how do you identify what the business is? And the answer is real simple. Somebody pays you for it. What do people pay you for so that they particularly are happy with what you do, and they might even pay you again and again for the same thing or something similar? And so if you break those things down into like 3 or 4 pieces of what your clients and customers are paying you for, then those are the things that you want an audience to hear. So, for example, I've been mentioning the pillars of thought leading, and then we're talking in particular about publishing your ideas and public speaking. So I can go and speak about how to get a book published. I can go and speak about how to publish articles. I can go and speak about how to be a public speaker, how to either get speaking engagements, which is kind of what we're talking about here, or how to be a better public speaker. And those are the kinds of things that people come to me for a service. So that's how it is, it seems to me. I always say that I'll ask when there's an audience if you'd raise your hands if you're in business now. So people raise their hands. No, raise your hands if you have ever had a customer or a client. That usually gets a few chuckles, And then raise your hands if any of these customers or clients are ever actually paid you, or if the check has actually been valid to be deposited, and all of that. And so you just sort of make the point that it's about developing business for your company and what your business focus is. And that's why one of the subtitles that I use is the art of separating yourself from the competitive pack. So that's what you do. You stay focused, just as if you were going out on a sales call or some sort of marketing call.
I like that a lot. That is very simple to say. Is it aligned with the business message? I want to take this even further, Ken, and talk about that. If you can speak about it, doesn't mean you should speak about it. If it doesn't help you to drive your business forward, or if it then suddenly means if you were to do this one topic, now you have to create an entirely new product offer, that makes no sense. So you need to be focused on what it is that you do and what the solutions, which is what you just said. People come to
Hmm.
you for solutions on thought leadership and speaking, and then you create your programs and your offer and your coaching and whatever mastermind workshops around things that people come to you for. So if we were to outline this, would you say it would be a true statement to say, have the end goal in mind of what the business is that you are
Yeah.
running and what you're
Yeah.
selling, and then sort of reverse engineer that to the topics that then will address some of these issues? Do you have any tips on that?
Well, pay attention to what I said earlier about the impact message. If you can get that focused on that,
Mm-hmm.
and in my book, The Speaker's Edge, I've got a section that will guide the reader to creating his or her own impact message, and that brings it to a focus. Talking about 20 or 30 seconds to say what you're really all about, and then from there, writing again. I'm going to go back to writing because a few things go on there. Whether you're writing a book or you're writing articles ongoing, you need to come up with angles that are somewhat different. So they're not always the same thing. Now, I can write about or speak about how to publish a book, and I can even break that down into how do you publish a book using a publisher versus how do you publish a book by self-publishing it, and how do you publish articles. That's a different process there. How do you become a speaking professional? How do you find speaking engagements? And then that comes, there's probably 7 or 8 chapters in my book about how you find speaking engagements, because there's a lot of different things, like you kind of pointed them out a little while ago. There's keynoting, and there's panelists, and there's what I call the informal path, knowing somebody, in other words, who is a meeting planner, formal, doing some research on the internet for the kinds of conferences that you might want to speak at, and then putting in a formal presentation, and on and on. So that's how you can become an expert in all these different aspects of your field, but not necessarily going somewhere else. The other thing is that sometimes people, they do want to publish a book, and they ask me, they say, well, what are the publishers looking for? Well, first of all, the answer to that is they're looking for everything, and whatever it might be that kind of hits them, positive reaction, then that's the book that they might want to publish. But it doesn't do any good if you're being told that cooking and baking books are really incredible, and you don't know how to even fry an egg or something, and nor do you care. You don't just do what is out there, you do what's in here, what's inside of you, and you do what you care about with your clients in those ways. By picking apart the pieces of what you offer to your clients, you can easily come up with 5, 8, 10, 12 potential speaking topics, article topics, even book topics.
I love that. So don't overthink it. Just stick to what you know, and
Yeah.
then just put it in the washing machine, spin it a couple of different times and see what shakes. I do agree. I think sometimes people just overthink this whole thing by a far margin. And you also know when you speak a couple times about a particular topic on whether or not that audience resonates with this particular type of topic or not. Right. So
Exactly right.
there
Exactly
you,
right.
yeah,
Yeah.
there you
Yeah.
go.
It's
So
it's kind of like what a professional comedian does in order to build his or her act. They go out on stage. A lot of times they really bomb, but they learn what doesn't work as well as what does work. And after a while, they've put together an act that's nice and crisp and moves along.
So you're absolutely correct. Test your material
Yeah.
and be prepared to, to do trial and error, maybe before you take it in front of a room of 10,000 people. Make sure that what you are putting out there really fits. Ken, this has been a fantastic interview. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. So where can we find out about your book and what you do?
Well, you can go to my website, of course, which is Thought Leading. Of course, Amazon. My books are on Amazon. You just have to remember how to spell my name, but you've got it spelled correctly here. So
yes, we have it. We will have all of that in the show notes. So yes, so your book's available on Amazon, and you have the speaking book and the thought leadership book, correct?
right. The book's available on more than Amazon. It's Barnes and Noble, and you've got to order it through a bookstore generally. But you can find it. It's not a best kept secret. It's a well-known secret among my clients.
Excellent. I love that. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Ken, for being here. It was a joy to have you on the show.
Great. It was great being here, Beata. Thank you.
And that's it for us today. Thank you so much for listening or watching the show. And until we see each other again next time, and goodbye. Thank you for listening to or watching the show. We are so excited that you're here, and we are very grateful for you. Now it's our turn to ask you for help. Please do share this episode with one other person that needs to hear what we were talking about today. If there's any question you have about business, please do reach out to us and let us know. And don't forget to schedule your complimentary Uncovery session at uncoverysession.com, where one of our business growth advisors will help you to figure out what your number one business growth blocker is in only 15 minutes. And that's it for us today. Until next time.